good morning, and welcome to the Venus Mystery Series. It's been a while, and I am glad to say that I'm back on point. I've got the music from the era, the 70s, so a little earlier. I like to go a little earlier in the music because I think it really suits the Venus Mystery Series, which is the ongoing life and adventures of Venus St. John, who lives in Venice Beach, California, is the product of hippie parents, one black, one white, and has been shielded and surrounded by love all her life, only to have it upended by murder and the changing tides of time. So, it's been a while. All things that happen in Los Angeles affect the Venus Mystery Series. The flu, influenza A, and production issues. But we are back. And, of course, being the Venus Mystery Series, we're going to play a little catch-up. Because I know that we started reading Venus with Her Head in the Clouds, and so I think that maybe we should play a little catch up. We'll go back a little bit and read some of that, and try to move on and get through some of get a little past where we were, and so that we can play catch up here. Okay, so if you're following along, Venus Her Head in the Clouds by Wednesday Palacios, which is available on Amazon.com. You can have this wonderful book just for $6.99. Okay, let's go. In front of the Santa Monica police station, I found Pepper and Sylvia sitting on the grass by the flagpoles, eating tuna sandwiches that Sylvia had brought from a vending machine in the police station canteen. "Wow," I joked. "You are a good cook, Sylvia." She waved a hand and said, "Oh, Pooh, it's too hot to cook, and how would I heat up anything at work?" Pepper pulled another one from the brown bag. "Want one?" I shook my head. "What I want is answers. Got any?" "Well," said Sylvia, "I can tell you what I found out so far. They don't have any suspect, but they always look at the family first, including you, Venus." "Me?" I gasped. Sylvia nodded her head slowly, nibbling on her sandwich. There was a deep silence among us. Finally, Sylvia said, "The problem is they have no gun. They just got search warrants for your house, the Abraham's house, soup bowl. They already searched Jill's place from ceiling to baseboards. Don't be surprised if Pepper and I are next." Pepper looked first pissed, then sad. I was wondering what was on her mind when she reached out and held Sylvia's hand. "You're right, baby. We shouldn't live together. People ain't ready for us. It's bad enough that they will figure out that we're lovers. You could lose your job." Sylvia shrugged. "I'm a file clerk, honey. A civilian, not a cop. I doubt they will do anything except give me a hard time." And she squeezed Pepper's hand lovingly. Came up in my throat. I really missed Jill. She always gave her hand the same sweet, loving squeeze. That long, curly blonde hair, those big, beautiful eyes. Nothing in the world mattered as long as we had each other. And now we didn't. I cried again. My friends put their arms around me right there on the lawn of the police department. I had let it out. I couldn't pretend to be strong forever. But I knew I wouldn't have to be strong. I looked down at my watch, a Snoopy watch with him playing tennis. The ball was on the second hand. Jill gave it to me because I read the peanut strips over herbal tea every morning. Nothing like a good comic strip. And I loved Snoopy. Oh, I sighed. I gotta go, I explained. I ought to check on Clarissa, and I promised Mr. Fendall at the Blind Center that I would read to them. Maybe, I should keep going, doing the things I do normally, so I don't have time to think. Well, while you're doing your routine, remember that everyone you two came in contact with, especially together, is a potential suspect, instructed Sylvia, adding, I listen sometimes while the cops are talking. Yeah, that's what I'll do, I said, brushing the grass from my legs and butt. I waved goodbye and skated away, thinking how this could give the cops someone else to think about other than us, widen the list of suspects. I could always call Clarissa from the Blind Center on Main Street. The Blind Center was just a storefront, with a front room with long tables and chairs and a back room with stacks of books in Braille. A makeshift office and a tiny kitchen with a coffee maker, sink, stove, and refrigerator. And a sink and a back door that led to the rear parking lot. I went to the bathroom next to the office, took off my skates, washed my feet, and put on my Dutch wooden clogs. This way, the listeners always knew it was me. The thought of them identifying me that way actually made me smile. Daylight saving time made the sun set later in the day, and the sun shone brightly through the windows behind my 3 rows of listeners at the Blind Center on Ocean Avenue and Windward Way. Mr. Fendall was handing out small cups of coffee to the listeners at the long tables. I opened the book to the page where I had left off the last time and began reading from The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The listeners ranged in age from 20 to 75, but they all listened with rapt attention. It was easy volunteer work, and the book was almost as fantastic as Tender is the Night. Tender is the Night was my favorite, and I couldn't wait to read it next. Aside from the occasional cough or throat clearing, the room was silent except for my voice. Mr. Fendall was a short, stocky black man whose life work was helping the blind. I never knew why he chose this line of work because he never discussed his personal life. Reading to the blind was one of the few things I did without my girl Jill. She usually took that time to do some thrift store shopping or cover at the soup bowl. I paused to smile at the memory of her looking at me, cocking her head to one side as her exposed itself, saying, "You are a saint, Venus." I sighed and continued reading until the hour was up. I closed the book with satisfaction and positioned myself by the door to shake everyone's hand as they left. I looked up to see Detectives Crown and Brownlee pulling up the curb. All of my happiness vanished as they got out of their beat-up, unmarked car. Fendall shook his head and started gathering cups, heading for the kitchen. He was not fond of the cops. By the time the 2 detectives got out of the car, Mr. Fendall was in the kitchen washing cups, singing softly, "By the time I get to Phoenix." They strolled up to me, Brownlee saying, "You are quite the figure in the community, Miss St. John. Everyone knew you would be here." My eyebrows rose. "Everyone?" "We asked around," Crown explained. Perfect, I thought, and I sighed and asked, "Any news about Jill?" Detective Brownlee patted the top of his very perfect afro and replied, "There is something. What was the exact nature of your relationship with Jill?" I cocked my head to one side. "I already told you," I said. "We grew up together. We were very close. We shared everything." Detective Crown seemed to snap with frustration. "Really? Did you share a bed together?" My mouth popped open in surprise. "Who told you that?" "I'm not at liberty to say, miss, but a jealous lover is a big motive for murder, don't you think?" he suggested. Detective Brownlee looked away, clenching his jaw, apparently embarrassed. Not as embarrassed as I was, listening to Mr. Findall singing softly in the background. I knew he was listening to our conversation. I was not embarrassed that I was a lesbian, but I was embarrassed that my privacy was infiltrated. Those moments when only we knew about our love, when we smiled our secret smile, and when we lay next to each other, and when we were watching late night television. Nobody knew, and there was something hot, sexy, and personable about it. My cheeks burned. I tried to stay cool, saying, "I have no one to be jealous of. We were very close." Detective Crown looked impatient. "Really? I heard the cook at your restaurant had the hots for her." "Big Bobby? The surfer?" I almost laughed. "Why should I be jealous? She was my girl." "But he was teaching her to surf better," interjected Detective Brownlee. "And maybe he was teaching her a little more than that." My breath quickened. "Who told you that?" I demanded. "Who was it? They forgot to mention that we trusted each other." We just stood there looking at each other, the two detectives and I. I shook my head and walked away. I went to the back of the center and changed into my shoes. Afterward, I walked through the maze of ever-narrowing Venice back streets until I was home. The air was hot and still with no wind blowing in off of the Pacific, and by the time I curled up in bed, I was sobbing. My friends were right. I had become the #1 suspect in the murder of my lover, Jill Abraham. By the time morning had come, up and was at the soup bowl sweeping, mopping, scrubbing away my blues. The restaurant was just one big room with a jukebox one end and 12 tables at the center, and a dance floor and a stage on the other end. I liked that the place had that health food store smell. I heard a sound, whirled around, and found myself watching Surfer Bobby come in the back door. His cheeks were red and his eyes were bloodshot, his hair tossed. "I thought you would be catching an early morning wave," I said, for lack of anything better to say. "Not today. Early morning interrogation," he muttered. I sighed heavily. "Sorry." "Not your fault. But Perry Mason didn't show up to help me either," he said in a mournful tone. "What are you doing here?" I asked, leaning on a rusty old string mop. "Nothing better to do, I guess," and yawned. "How are you holding up?" "Dude, her parents must be freaking out. Yesterday, I wrote her name on my board and I hit the waves at Topanga in her honor. You know, that's how I got pulled in for questioning. They even called me a stalker and said I was upset because you and Jill were lovers. And I told them to kiss off because you and Jill could have any man you wanted. And then he did something I never would have expected. He started to blubber. He just dissolved into tears, plopped down on a stool at the counter, and drenched his hands. I realized that I had misjudged him and dropped the mop and rushed across the room. I knew that he was not the killer, not unless he missed his calling as an Academy Award-winning actor. We wept together until we were spent and pulled away exhausted. I looked at him and shook my head. "They think I killed Jill," I told him. I shook my head, staring quietly into space, and then I realized Bobby was staring at me hard. "It ain't my business, you know. And you guys are like sisters to me. And if you loved her, well, then why would you kill her? The most beautiful girls in Venice Beach who only hung out with each other." "What the hell?" His voice trailed away and he dragged himself wearily into the kitchen, banging pots and pans, until he finally dragged a large bag of potatoes from the pantry, plopped down in a battered chair, and started peeling with a combination of anger and speed. I didn't quite know what he was trying to say, but whatever he meant, he was furious about it. I watched the menu blackboard and stood leaning against the sign, waiting for it to dry. The marine layer burned off and the sun was starting to shimmer on the water. I could still see Jill walking out of the water, dragging her big orange surfboard, wearing her skimpy yellow bikini, her curly, long blonde hair dripping and her body glistening as she waved to me. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, her vision was gone and the board was dry. I wrote Jill's carrot stew, house salad, fresh squeezed lemonade, Bobby's fresh baked bread. I went back inside and announced to Bobby, "The Jill special!" He gave it a thumbs up and began his job, just as George, our Fijian friend, began his job as a busboy, dishwasher, handyman. I'm going to pause here for a second because I think I should be clarifying something. Since Jill was murdered, as you are aware, because of the beginning of the book, Venus planned to not open the restaurant that day. But she showed up first, mopping the floor, trying to get out her angst and everything. And Bobby showed up trying to cook away his blues. And George shows up because George is always the stable, rock steady friend, no matter what friend that Jill and Venus have. So it's not unusual that despite the fact that the restaurant is supposed to be closed, that the three of them wind up there opening the restaurant anyway, because it's that even in grief have to keep moving thing about us as human beings that keeps us alive. I just wanted to clarify that because I wish I'd made it clearer in the book, but it seems like people don't mind, but I feel like it should be clarified. Alright, moving on. I dragged myself back into the office just as I heard Jimi Hendrix blare from the jukebox. Naturally, my desk was a mess. It faced the window and the beach, and I worked on the books for a couple of hours. I yawned and was about to lay my head on the desk when a sunburnt, dirty face pressed against the window. It was Sage, the local character who lived on the beach and got one free meal a day from the restaurants. He kept beating his fist against the window and baring his teeth at me. "You nigger," he screamed. "You jealous black nigger. You killed my Jill." And then he spit on the window and walked away. I want to break from reading again because I was very hesitant to use this word, even though I'm African American myself. I'm uncomfortable saying the word, but it's a matter of poetic license that there are people who use this word freely and with malice, and which is what this character is doing in this book. He's using this word in anger to be purposefully mean to Venus. Okay, moving on. I was so stunned, I didn't realize Bobby and George were standing behind me. They were panting from running, rushing into my office to see what was going on, and George asked, "You okay?" Before I could say yes, George was running out of my office door, tackling Sage on the boardwalk outside my window and giving him some powerful backhands. Whap, whap, whap. And strong words in his native tongue. Nobody stopped George, and when he was done, he stomped back inside, panting, his hands on his hips. He looked at me and said, "That's how we handle things back home." I was shaken and spent, and I closed my ledger, deciding I was done going over the books. Without saying goodbye, I slipped out of the office door into the alley behind my restaurant. I had to get out of there. Chapter 3. Moving on. Now we're all caught up. I want to say this to my readers. We're all caught up. And we're going to move on. It was mid-morning, and I strolled down the boardwalk, shivering for no reason. People may have been staring at me, but I didn't notice. Venice was a small, tight-knit neighborhood, and we all pretty much knew each other. Everybody knew what happened to Jill. Suddenly, it began to rain lightly, a hot, misty LA rain. I didn't try to shield myself from the rain. I just let myself get wet. And then I saw the neon glow of our neighborhood bar, the Blues, and I headed straight for it. I was drained and lonely, and damn, did I need a drink. The bar was crowded, and I tried to remember what day it was. Truth be told, people didn't seem to need a reason to get drunk. That place was always crowded, though it was not particularly well decorated or anything. And there were palm plants in each corner of a square room, neon beer signs on the walls, and beat-up tables and chairs scattered around, with a shabby bar running the length of the place. And then I saw Mr. Findle sitting at the end of the bar in his shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops, sipping a beer. I slipped onto a stool beside him and sighed. "Bad day?" he asked. "And it's just getting started," I answered. "What's the deal with the cops?" he asked. "They are brutal." I shrugged and looked at the worn brown ceiling fans. They were stupid. They aren't even smart enough to find out who killed Jill. Findall nodded, saying, "Yes, that would require brains. Seems they're just focused on you being a lesbian." My heart started to pound. I didn't say anything. The bartender, Larry, a big red-faced white guy, put down a cardboard coaster and asked, "What can I get you, Venus?" "Ginger ale," I replied. Larry grabbed a tall glass, filled it with ice, and splashed ginger ale into the glass from the soda gun, topping it off with a straw. I took a long drink, then sat silently staring off into space. Mr. Findall gave me a look before he asked, "Why don't you like men?" I swiveled around and gave him a frown. "Why don't you?" I asked. He laughed, holding his belly and shaking a finger at me. "Good answer. Now, why don't you drink?" "I do. I just don't feel like it today," I said, and adding, "At the risk of ruining our friendship, I need to ask you if you killed Jill." Findall looked surprised and hurt. "Really, Venus? We've been friends for 2 years. That's all you think of me?" I shrugged. "She's my lover, and people ask me the same thing." Mr. Findall hung his head. He genuinely looked sad. "Maybe that's why she's dead. That whole lesbian thing, you know." I lost it. "So it's our fault, huh? Her fault? My fault?" Mr. Findall shrugged. "It's somebody's fault." I was silent for a long time. The jukebox started to play "Billy, Don't Be a Hero." I felt myself getting lost in the tune, staring at my ginger ale. I didn't feel like crying anymore. I was just so sad. Outside, the mist turned to a steady rain. I watched through the bar's open doors as people strolled or hurried by. It had become overcast and dreary, and that perfectly suited my mood. I could medicate myself with booze like Pepper and her girlfriend, but I had already come to realize that my troubles would still be there. I looked around and noticed how many people were drinking in the middle of the day, including my old buddy Mr. Findall. He leaned over to me and said, "Are you interested in what sweet baby Jill was doing before she died?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Huh? Doing?" He nodded. "There was a lot more going on than just surfing. That girl knew how to turn a profit." And on her own terms, too. What are you talking about? I demanded. She had the best pot around, he told me. I stared at him harder. If that was possible, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Jill was dealing pot? How was it possible that I didn't know about this? No one was closer to her than I was. She made her transactions just once a week, while you were reading to the blind. I figured you didn't know when you didn't hook me up with my stash. And when the cops showed up, when you were reading to the... I was so nervous I almost shit a brick. I don't mind telling you. I was almost too shocked to respond. But when I looked over at the door again, I saw Detectives Crown and Brownlee standing in the rain, giving me a hard look. They walked over, and when I looked back, I noticed that Mr. Findall had vanished. Roberta Flack was started playing on the jukebox. The first time ever I saw... Miss St. John, I need you to come down to the station, said Detective Crown. I said nothing, shaking my head sadly. People from the bar were staring at us. I let them lead me to the car, drive me to the station, and lead me to a stark, smelly interrogation room. I was scared, but I was so emotionally spent. I just went along with the program. Crown turned a worn wooden chair around and sat, while Brownlee leaned against the grimy wall. They stared at me hard for a moment. Brownlee sighed, asking, "So, where's the gun?" I looked up at him confused. "What?" "We searched your place this morning. We already searched Jill's place." "Save us the trouble of tossing the restaurant," suggested Crown. I just gaped at them, my mouth hanging open, dumbfounded. Damn, the shit had really hit the fan. I was going to the Slammer, and I had never even gotten a jaywalking ticket. That's when, for some reason, I realized my life had really, really changed forever. I woke up this morning and forgot to skate everywhere. I watched George pummel Sage and found out about my lover from Mr. Findall. Nope, nothing in my life could ever be the same. Crown grinned. You don't have it, do you? You're such a goody-goody. You don't know jack shit, do you? Brownlee struck his fist on the bare metal table. Bam! Why was Jill Abraham killed, Miss St. John? Don't you have a clue? I still said nothing, because I just couldn't think of anything to say, and they were really starting to scare me. What was Jill up to? Crown demanded. And who was she up to it with? I said nothing, because he was right. I had missed out on a lot of things, and my beautiful Jill had been keeping secrets from me. What else had she been hiding from me? I was frozen with fear and heartbreak. We're going to get to the bottom of this, even if we have to hound you day and night. So, if you know anything, find out anything, I want to remind you that we are the police, and you should bring all information to us. Don't wander all over Venice trying to solve this crime yourself, said Crown sternly. Brownlee sighed with disgust. Get out of here. Just get out of here. I fled that filthy, stinking room with its naked light bulb snaking down from the ceiling. I want to leave the whole mess behind and keep fleeing. But where would I go? Okay, so for those who are actually following along in the book, I stopped at page 34, which I'm going to do something that book readers, lovers hate. I'm folding down the corner of the page because I keep losing my place. Okay, so now we find out that Venus was pretty oblivious to what was going on in the world around her. She didn't realize that her girlfriend was dealing marijuana while she was reading to the blind. So here Venus is doing the Good Samaritan thing, reading to the blind and everything, and her girlfriend is dealing pot. Well, now her girlfriend is dead. So the question is, who killed Jill Abraham? Well, I guess we'll find out the next time that I read from Venus with Her Head in the Clouds. My name is Wednesday Palacios, and I'm the author. And this is the Venus Mystery Series. Have a good day.